Welcome to the Mycelium Network podcast, a podcast all about early stage web developers and the mentors and teachers that help them along the way. Hey, Joel. Welcome to the Mycelium Network podcast.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So I always ask people to write a short introduction in the doc. The idea is that I'll put it in the show notes eventually. I used to read them out, but then I thought, no, that's kind of like, I don't want to be the person telling your story. You should tell your story. But what I like about the one that you wrote here is it's kind of going to lead us into my first question, because you say you're a self-taught developer who's gone from building like really basic HTML and CSS websites to being the fractional CDO of a startup and a whole lot in between. So can you tell us about that whole lot in between?
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, I mean, so like I said, I'm self-taught. I started playing around with code when I was in middle school. I built a website with the website builder AngelFire. I doubt most of the listeners will know that. The veterans might. So, but it wasn't good enough. So I started playing around with it to customize some of the CSS here and there, things like that. And then I just kind of fell in love with it. So ever since, I've just been addicted to writing code and building things and customizing things. You know, back in the day of MySpace, I'd customize everyone's themes for them, things like that. But yeah, I mean, eventually I got into it as a career. I used to do audio engineering and used to be a musician, but kind of realized that I prefer working better hours than, you know, running sound at a bar overnight until 4 a.m. or having a more consistent paycheck. So I eventually decided to chase development instead. And you know, getting my foot in the door was pretty tough, not having a degree at that time, especially. And once I finally got my foot in the door, then it was just, you know, I couldn't stop. I was working day jobs. I was working on the side. I was doing freelance. I was doing anything I could to get my hands on some code, and might call it a bit of an addiction, but it was fun. And I felt like I was trying to compensate for my lack of education. So I felt like I constantly had to be working on something and learning new technologies. But yeah, because of that, I've been able to work on a lot of different technologies. I've been able to work in different industries, hold different positions: part-time, full-time, contract, freelance, consultant, fractional CTO, all kinds of stuff. It's just been a wild ride, but it's been a blast.
Yeah, I love that. Sounds very familiar. I also used to be a musician before I got into tech, and kind of switched for the same reason. I couldn't make a decent living enough out of it. It was just I was in classical guitar, and so that's a very niche audience. And in South Africa, there wasn't a big audience for that, and going international is even harder. So, you know, I eventually started toying with tech, and then kind of that just one thing led to the other, and I eventually ended up in tech. So that's a very familiar story to me.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned that you've had access to play with a lot of different technologies, and no kidding, because when I went on your website, you have the section where you can learn more about the work you've done, and then you have this filter by technology, and I clicked on that, and I was like, holy Moses, there's a lot here. So is this just a side effect of, like you said, you felt you had to like compensate for the fact you didn't have an official or whatever degree in tech, so you've like, or is it just curiosity that drive you to this?
Yeah, no, it's a bit of both, I think. What's funny is on my website, that's only the interesting projects that I thought were worth putting on there. There's plenty of other ones that I didn't even bother putting on there. So the amount of technology I've touched is probably even more than that, and I've forgotten half of it. No, a lot of it is yeah, I'm just really fascinated by the technology, and I'm always interested in learning new technology. I'm not one who I'm not in favor of these tech wars of, you know, React versus Vue or whatever. It's I'm not a fan of it. I think all technologies are great, and I think they all have pros and cons, and I want to play around with all of them and learn all of them just for the heck of it. And that's part of it. Part of it is, feeling like I had to compensate for my lack of education. At this point, I don't feel like I need to anymore, but for the first, few years of my career, especially, I really felt like I did. Part of it wasn't exactly my choice either. One of the jobs I held, almost every project I worked on, they were like, hey, so you've got this project. It's in this technology. Nobody here knows it, so good luck. And I had to figure it out. So there was a lot of those that, I mean, I'm thankful for the experience, but at the time it was rough.
Yeah, no, for sure. Having to kind of, and I think that is the, it comes to this point that I've said that everybody is a beginner at something at some point. It doesn't matter like how many years experience you have. And I think that story like exemplifies that, where you work on this project and you gain this experience with these set of technologies, and then somebody comes to you and says, hey, here's a new project. Nobody knows what to do. Good luck with that. And you feel completely like a newbie again. Now you have to learn. And sometimes it can even be in the same language. Like I've told people, like the fact that you know JavaScript is going to help you with React, but there is core concepts of React that is going to trip you up in the beginning, that you need to, the whole thing of thinking in React, like you need to read that part before you jump into it, because you have to have a mental shift. And then when you go to Vue, you kind of have to have a different mental shift again.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's similarities, but there's differences as well, even though the underlying language is the same for all of them.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, my early days, I was working in JavaScript with jQuery for a long time. And so making that transition from jQuery to Vue or React or whatever, it was a complete 180 in how I had to think about how to do things. And at one point, I ended up having to go back to a project that was on jQuery after spending years working in Vue. And it was rough. I've forgotten how to think that way. And I kept trying to do things in the Vue way with jQuery, and it doesn't work that way. So yeah, it is. It's same language, but entirely different experience.
Yeah. I've found myself often when I'm in a vanilla JavaScript project, wanting to reach for a use state hook. And I'm like, oh, wait, that doesn't exist here. You have to manage state differently.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I saw is that you mentioned the words indie hacking. And I'm really interested in that whole ecosystem, like the IndieWeb and this idea of owning your own content, running your own website, having your own domain, and then basically sharing to the social networks. But the social networks is not where you post. That's where you share. And I kind of think that's kind of what social media was really for, but it turned into, like, it became where people's content live. And then if one of these platforms goes away, people are like, oh my goodness, all my content's gone. So, and then another thing that you said is that on your Twitter profile, it says like, you make everything in the open. So those two are very closely related. Do you want to dig a little bit into the concepts of IndieWeb and making things in the open?
Sure, yeah.
And maybe also with the angle of how has that helped you in your career? I think that might be interesting to know as well.
Definitely, yeah. Well, to be honest, I don't remember how I stumbled upon the indie hacking community. It was through Twitter, but I think it was just, I don't know, trying to find tech-based people that were interesting, and then over time it eventually kind of led into that. But somehow now I'm kind of inundated with the indie hacker community, really, and it's pretty great. They're all very supportive. So yeah, a lot of things are based around, for example, the website indiehackers.com. Cortland Allen built that, and eventually Stripe acquired it. He still runs it, and it's a really cool resource to let indie hackers, bootstrappers be able to just kind of share their information, share their stories, their successes, their failures, what they learned from that, things like that. And that's what I like about it is it's different than just, my whole career, like I said, I've been playing around with technology. I've built who knows how many things just because they were useless things, but they were just something to build and learn. And so it kind of shifts that into building something to solve problems, whether it's solving your own problem, solving someone else's problem that you know. It's making other people's lives easier by building something interesting. And that's exactly where I want to be as a developer. Is the most rewarding and the most enjoyable thing for me is I want to build something that makes someone else's life easier. And so, that's what got me sucked into it. And so I started playing around building different web apps, different, a few different projects here and there. And the thing about the community is everyone, a lot of people everybody shares different levels of information, but everybody in that community is pretty open about their startup and what they're doing. Some of them share screenshots of their revenue every month, and some of them, just show like, this is the technology I'm using, or this is the problem I had, or this was an experience I had with someone reaching out to customer service and how I solved it. Anything, everything. The thing about building in public and with the indie hacker community is you don't have to follow a specific rule set. It's whatever you want to share. And everybody's just kind of there to help each other, and you learn from everyone's experience. So, that's kind of what got me into it, and how I was able to learn a lot from them, and hopefully was able to bypass some mistakes, common mistakes, because I learned from other people who had already made those mistakes. Now, as far as how that's helped me in my career, I think that could go a few different ways. In one side, I see a lot of indie hackers say that because they've started their own business and ran their own business, they now consider themselves un-hireable. And for some people, that's their goal. They want to be un-hireable because they just either can't imagine being reporting to a boss, or they just can't deal with the day in, day out of office work, or whatever the situation is. A lot of people in that community, that's their goal. For me, it's just been a way to expand my knowledge and my experience of the community, of the technologies, of new ways of looking at how to build things. I've been able to bring those experiences into my work and say, hey, I learned something new about React, or why don't we think about the customer in this mindset, or anything from the technology to just the critical thinking about how you think about things. And I think it can help you too. I think it can help you see things from your leader's perspective. So whether that's your direct boss, manager, or if that's the CEO, CTO of the company, whatever that situation is, I think it can help you see things from their perspective. Having attempted to run your own small thing, startup, whatever you want to call it, you can kind of see like, oh, okay, I understand these pain points, or I understand that they have to consider all of these different things. It's not as straightforward as I thought. So yeah, I think it can help in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that last part, a friend of mine, Peter, has oftentimes when we've had problems and you have these different potential avenues and you maybe don't understand why you would choose one over the other, he's often said, like, imagine that you and your buddy in a garage trying to build something and you got $1 million. Like, how would you spend it? Like, think about it from that perspective. And that's always like, that's a good thing, because now you can put yourself in that situation. Like, if this was my product and I had $1 million and it's only the two of us, so we have constraints of finances and we have the constraints of it's only the two of us, which of these things would you have invested in if it was your company? So I think it is great. I think what I'm curious about is the un-hireable aspect of that. Is that like just because you turn more and more into a cat and it's less able to be heard, herding cats? Is it that you turn more into a cat and so it's too hard to herd you, so employers are like, can't work with this guy? Or is it just that literally working a 9-to-5 doing the same thing is just going to be soul crushing?
I think it's more of the latter for a lot of people. The way I understood it, the way I take it when I hear people talk about that, is that I guess they imagine that it would be too impossible for an employer to satisfy all of their needs, to be able to hire them. So they might have a high set of requirements now of, yeah, well, my time is my own now, so I'm considered free. So I'm going to need to be able to work whatever hours I want. I'm going to need to be able to have this, who knows how big of a salary. I'm going to need the freedom to work wherever I want, whenever I want, and who knows what other requirements they might have. So I don't know. I think that might be part of the un-hireable approach, or mindset. But again, I think it might be different for everybody. Some people might just be that they could no longer even imagine going back to working the 9 to 5. It's too soul crushing for them, or whatever.
That's interesting, because I've also been at Indie Hackers on the website, but I haven't in a while, and I need to get back there because it is an inspiring place. Do you see, like, because I found out about you through Polywork. This is how this conversation happened. So do you think Polywork is like, Polywork and Indie Hackers, are they like birds of the same feather, or are they mutually exclusive? I'm trying to think.
So I don't use Polywork a whole lot. Most of that is because I just forget to do things like that, to go and look at these communities. I'm terrible about keeping up with social media and being involved with the communities. But I want to. I never take the time to do it. So from my perspective, I think that they're somewhat independent, but Polywork to me is what LinkedIn should have been for people who are indie hackers, but not just indie hackers. But I think it's better than LinkedIn for people who are indie hackers or other similar things, where basically you have the whole concept behind it is you're not just one job, you're not one title. You have all of these different roles, whether you're on the board at another company, or whether you're doing freelance, or you're running 3 startups or whatever. I think Polywork is a lot more inclusive for those types of roles. So I think it's helpful for indie hackers, but I don't necessarily think they're dependent on each other.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point of view. I agree with that. And I didn't realize that I didn't connect this poly aspect of the Polywork with what you just said until I saw the very first video they posted on the YouTube channel, where the founder of Polywork talked about what the idea behind Polywork is. And he talked about exactly that. Like, you aren't defined by a single role or a single title. You are what's that other TED talk, a multi-potentialite. You have all these potentials and you have all these things that you're doing. And then I was like, gotcha, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I do think, like, the LinkedIn for indie hackers, it does sound like a very good analogy of what it is. I'm enjoying it, and I'm trying to use it more and more. And I know they're investing quite a bit in the platform and really trying to grow it. And I wish them all the best of success. I mean, this podcast exists largely because of the amazing people I got that just offered to come on the podcast, even though it didn't even exist. So I'm thankful for that. So I read that you also considered yourself primarily a back-end developer, but then more and more you found yourself leaning towards front-end, and especially JavaScript was one of the things that drew you to the front end. So what are the things about JavaScript that got you really excited, and maybe that you enjoy at the moment, that you're really excited about right now in the world, and maybe things that's like on the horizon?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I mean, most of my experience has been full stack, and I usually would lean more towards the back end, like you said. The front end, I don't mind it, but I'm just not a very visual person, so I'm not great at the UI UX kind of stuff. I need someone else, like a designer, to kind of help me along with those things, but otherwise front end can be enjoyable whenever it's more about the logic and things like that. So what excites me about JavaScript, I love, as a full stack developer, I love that I can use the same language full stack. It's super exciting now that, Node is becoming so popular, and frameworks like Nuxt and Next.js are out there where you can build your full stack all in the same project with the same language. And if you're using things like TypeScript, you can have full stack type safety and things like that. It's really, really cool to be able to have this cohesive system instead of, well, I've got to have this one environment for my backend with Python, PHP, Go, whatever, and then this other entirely different environment for front end, which you can still do, and it's still great if you want to do that. But the convenience of being able to do it all together in one language is it's really cool.
Yeah, that's very true. It is freeing. I definitely always saw myself as more of a front-end developer, but when Node came along, it opened up avenues that I didn't have before. And to some extent, I still see myself as primarily front-end, but I definitely can do the full stack. That's for sure. I do build projects for some folks that do use Prisma and MongoDB, and it's all doing that all through Node. So there's some talk, a proposal from Microsoft about bringing the core concepts of TypeScript to JavaScript. It's a bit of a hot topic. Do you think that's a good idea, or do you think it should be rather two separate things and the thing is, the way that because that is a thing, you can't just change JavaScript to be a typed language, right? Because there's way too much code out there that'll break. That's always the thing with JavaScript is you have to be so careful how you introduce new features that you don't break things going back. So it looks to me, if what I've read from the proposal is that it's almost like this JS doc style type of thing where you use annotations. And it's just that becomes part of the core language as opposed to it being a TypeScript thing. Do you think that would be good to have it part of the JavaScript language and therefore part of ECMA and the standards body as opposed to this thing that Microsoft runs?
Oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard that. I think what you said is pretty much right on it. Is sure, it would be really cool to have that, but man, that would break so much stuff. So yeah, finding that right balance. I guess PHP did similar things, right? So they started implementing strict types, and you could optionally, on each PHP file, you could optionally put strict type enables at the top of it, and it would force it. It would throw compiling errors, basically, if it didn't match the types, which I started doing eventually, and started forcing all my code to be strictly typed in PHP. But it didn't break things before that because you had to explicitly enable it per file. And then, eventually maybe moving into having that by default enabled over time could be useful. So I think if JavaScript were able to implement something like that, I think it could be cool. I think having the type safety in JavaScript helps a lot, and I think it's really useful. I think it does make the learning curve much higher for newer developers. So that's a bit dangerous. JavaScript is such a common language right now, and it's so easy to be able to tell newer developers, yeah, just play around with JavaScript. You could pretty much guarantee to get a job. You can play with it directly in the browser. You can, test it around very easily. And don't worry about TypeScript at first, because first you just need to learn how to write in a programming language. And doing TypeScript, I think, could be overwhelming to someone who's new. So, I don't know. That's a really interesting concept, but personally, I would love it, but I don't think as a whole, I don't think it might be the best idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. That is also the concern for me, is because I can't remember if it was a question I wanted to ask somebody or whether it is something I did pose to someone. But I was asking this question, when do you start introducing TypeScript to new developers? When is the right time? And it's pretty far down the line as far as I'm concerned. There's quite a lot in JavaScript to just wrap your head around. If you don't understand the whole idea of closures and the whole idea of how you do functional programming in JavaScript, because that seems to be where JavaScript is moving more and more, then adding types on top of that, it's going to be... I think one of the nice things about front-end just web in general is how approachable it is. It's
Yeah.
it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's definitely easier than trying to get into like an enterprise level language as your first language.
Yeah, the entry point is a lot lower. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do quite a bit without having to have this like breadth of programming experience. So yeah, I think if it's almost like, you can already now, if you write some JavaScript and it's not like using ESM, then you can put the little use strict at the top, right? And then it tells the JavaScript parser, hey, if you run into a thing, just don't try and help me, just throw an error, which is like PHP, like you said. So maybe they'll, if this comes to pass, maybe it'll be something like that. Maybe we'll have a type annotation to say at type safe or something, and then it kicks into a different JavaScript engine.
It would have to be an optional opt-in that over time we could potentially move to be default to true. But for now, for a long time, it would have to be something like that. Yeah.
So another tricky, potentially question. What do you see as the biggest challenges in tech?
Yeah, that's a great question. Specifically in web development too, I think this applies more so in web development than most other areas, although maybe not. I don't have that much experience outside of web. But analysis paralysis. I think there are way too many cool tools in web development and technologies, programming languages, frameworks, whatever. That how do you decide what to use for each project? And do you keep using the same thing, or do you use the new shiny thing every day? There's too much of that, and it's great, but it is super overwhelming, especially for newer developers. But I mean, even today, I struggle with that regularly. Of if I'm starting a new project, I would love to play around with this new cool technology, but I could use the same thing that's safe. I know it, and I could do it a lot faster, and it would be a better end result because I know it so well. So I think that's one of the big challenges, and kind of along the same lines is it changes so rapidly. Every day there's something new, or things are updated, every day, where new features are deprecated or whatever. The rapid changing of the front end technologies it can feel overwhelming to keep up with, whether you're an early stage developer or a veteran. Especially in the front end. And for me, I think those are two of the biggest challenges.
Yeah. So do you have any strategies for how to safely drink from the fire hose?
For me, it's been, so as an indie hacker, they always say, don't go with the new shiny, go with what you know. The best framework to build your project in is the thing that you know the best, whatever you're most comfortable in. And, majority of the time that is true. I think that's a great case, unless your plan or your goal is to expand your portfolio of technology for your resume or whatever. If that's your goal, then sure, learn something new. But for the most case, I think it's whatever you already know. But if you're jumping in brand new and you don't know anything, what I found is jumping into, if you have resources, if you have contacts of somebody who's already in that field, maybe learning something that they know so that they can be a mentor, or at least just be a source of support. And then from there, you can branch out to whatever kind of comes your way. For me, most of the technology I learned was a result of either somebody I knew or a job I got. And so it was not always my choice, but it kind of, I got led down these paths because those are the doors that opened to me. And then some of the other ones I kind of forced open myself, because I would spend who knows how many hours trying to learn new things because I wanted to learn it. But I mean, that's how I spent half of my career in the e-commerce framework Magento. It was one of those projects at that job where they were like, well, we don't have a Magento person and we have a new Magento project, so you win. And from then on, I was the Magento guy because I terribly built a website in Magento. And, 5-6 years later, 4 or 5 years later, I don't know. I got a job as a Magento developer across the ocean in an entirely new continent, and got to come over to France and work a job there as the Magento guy at this company. And after that, I kind of decided I'm done with Magento. I'm ready to go back to building tools. Like I said, I want to build tools that people use and not e-commerce or marketing things. So I kind of got out of that eventually, but that experience helped me get to where I am. So yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but
no, that's all good. That's all good. So to go further off on a tangent, there's 2 tools that I've seen that you've built that really intrigues me. And one is really funny, and I can totally understand why you created that. Because I've heard so many developer stories about how many domain names do you own? And it's like, let me pull out my spreadsheet and see where I'm up to. And I've also got probably more than I use. So the 2 tools I'm talking about, the one is completely different, but I'm curious about that one, and that's Mycosplace. And then the other one is Domain Goalie, which is such a cool name. If you want to talk about those 2.
Yeah. So Domain Goalie, exactly. It's a silly product. So yeah, we all know the joke, the running joke of developers and indie hackers both, of we have way too many domains. We're kind of obsessed with buying them. We have a graveyard of dead projects that we never finished, but we bought the domain for it. And it's just a running joke because it's true for a lot of us. And I think one day I saw somebody on Twitter post something like, can I hire someone to insult me every time I try to buy a domain, or something silly like that? And I just thought it was so funny. And I thought, well, I mean, I can't be there to watch over your shoulder, but a browser extension can be. So I just spent like a couple hours that evening like, hey, I've never built a browser extension. Let's figure out how to do that. And just played around, built a super simple, silly browser extension that basically just it's right now it only supports a few of the main websites where you buy domains, but it checks to see if you're trying to buy a domain, and it shows a pop-up that basically tries to talk sense into you to kind of say like, hey, will you be spending time on this in 2 years? Like, is this really worth your money right now? And I mean, it's not really useful. It's kind of annoying, but it's just a fun little thing. And I think I've got like one person using it, and it is what it is. It was just a fun response of like, hey, I built this in case you want to use it, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's hilarious, but it's cool. I like how that often leads you down paths. Like exactly here, it was a case of, I've never built a browser extension. Let me see what that's all about. And here's a project that we can talk about.
Exactly.
And so Mycosplace, how did that come about?
So yeah, my wife and I, we go to conventions like Dragon Con, similar to Comic Con, but other ones. And we usually will cosplay. We'll dress up in costume of different characters. So my wife is great at making those cosplays. I just put them on and wear them. But one of the most annoying things about that is the hours, days, weeks you'll spend afterwards searching for photos of yourself. And a lot of times there are Facebook groups where people will just dump their hundreds or thousands of photos they took, and you'll just scroll through all of them trying to find them. And it's annoying, but it is what it is. And I've also found, like, at a lot of photo shoots at conventions, a lot of us would spend time afterwards just looking each other up on our phones on Instagram right then and there, following each other so we could post, photos of each other. And I just thought there's got to be a better way to do this. So I decided, it was, I think, a year ago at the convention, I kind of thought, all right, I want to think about this, see if I could find a way to make this easier for us. And so my first thought was, yeah, business cards would be cool. Having pictures of you and your cosplays on the business cards, so that way the person won't forget. They're going to take hundreds of photos at that convention. They're going to forget who gave them that card. And the problem with that is every year you're going to have new cosplays. I have some friends. One of my friends this year brought 16 cosplays. I mean, there's no way he's going to fit all those photos on a card. And then every year he'd have to get new cards printed. So that's not really reasonable. So then I thought, a digital portfolio you can update whenever you want. But how do you connect that? And so then I thought, well, okay, QR codes. QR codes have been really popular, especially through COVID. They've kind of made a comeback because of the pandemic, I think, especially within Europe, at least. So I thought, okay, build a portfolio, get a QR code that points to that portfolio. You can also have all your links to your social media accounts. So it's kind of like a link tree with a portfolio combined. And then you can get business cards with a couple photos of your cosplays on them, and then that QR code, so people can either at that moment scan the QR code and go to your website, or they can take the card and then later, if they forget who you were, they can scan it and find a photo of the cosplay that you were in. And so I thought, okay, maybe that'll kind of connect everything. So yeah, I built my cosplays as a way to try and do all of that. This year at Dragon Con was my first year really getting to try it out. In the meantime, I've had a few other users test it out at a couple other conventions. One in I've completely lost where it was, so never mind. Anyway, it was somewhere here in Europe. I can't remember now, but so I've seen a few people try it out, and then I tested it out this year at Dragon Con. To be honest, it didn't get the reaction I thought it would. It still seems to be missing something that really, I think either people don't see its relevance or don't see its value right away. So whether or not it's missing a feature or if it's missing just clear communication, haven't quite figured that out yet. But I think it's on the right track. And, I've got a group of friends who we all cosplay together, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from them about it and what they thought it was when they first saw it or what they expect it to be. So I think it'll continue to change. There might be more of a social platform aspect to it. A lot of cosplayers seem to use Facebook groups, but a lot of people hate using Facebook now. I mean, there's a lot of drama around that. So a lot of people don't want to be on the platform, but Facebook groups is really the only place they can find that experience or those cosplay groups. So maybe finding a way to implement a way for them to replace Facebook groups with this platform might be useful. Just some different ideas I've got I'm playing with right now.
Yeah, I've totally heard this talk about this idea that there is a need for very niche social networks. And I think so Web3 is an interesting topic that has multiple angles, and depending on which angle you approach it at, you'll have different people respond in different ways. I think some of the underlying core concepts that has been forgotten isn't a bad idea, like the whole idea of being decentralized, owning what you make, forming smaller groups. I think those are good ideas, and I think that might be where it plays into, because things like Mastodon and stuff like that, where you can spin up your own little version of Twitter in a sense, but for a very niche community, and you can cross-link it between other Mastodon instances that is relevant but different enough to have their own niche. So I think maybe you're onto something here. I think maybe the cosplay community would like this.
Yeah, I was against it being anything similar to a social platform for a while. I kind of kept pushing back on that. Part of that is I just didn't want to deal with a social platform. I mean, there's always so much stuff that you have to deal with that, with moderators and, just the worst people, always ruin it for everybody else. So I didn't want to deal with that. But also I just kept thinking, I mean, there's so many great social platforms out there. Who's going to want to use this random one that I built? I mean, it's like, who am I kidding? I'm not going to be able to compete with a platform like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, things like that. Nor do I want to. But your point kind of has been, what you just said has been made clear to me, I think, by multiple people who I've tried talking to about my cosplays is, yeah, well, they want a more specific platform that is dedicated to cosplayers, and just the cosplay community wants somewhere to live, basically. And there are other platforms that I think have been trying to do that. And so, again, I wasn't trying to compete with them. And if they are doing a good job, great, let's go there. But so far, I haven't seen any traction on any of them. Some people have kind of said like, oh, this platform we thought was going to be great, but it didn't really do what we wanted it to do or whatever. So, yeah, I think maybe there is a want for that. But I kind of was closed-minded about that for a little bit and wasn't open to trying that. But I think finally they've talked me into it.
Yeah, I have a project that I've not abandoned, but it's been definitely put on the back burner for quite some time, and it's because of a lot of the same fears. So that one is a very different audience. The audience is finding small businesses in your own area and supporting small local businesses. But I did think that one of the benefits of something like that would be the ability to review, and that scares me. Because now you're opening it up to user comments, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to go down that road. So I've kind of been, I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of just let the project, it's live, it's up there, it's working in a shape and form. Like I get these stats that 4 people visited it this week, nobody visited this week, 2 people visited this week. And I'm like, okay, so somehow people are stumbling upon it. But again, I need to invest time and energy into that, and I think there needs to be a social aspect to it, and that scares me, and I think that's why I've put it up. Something as simple as people being able to upload a profile photo scares me, because now you have to monitor that stuff, because people can upload anything as their profile picture. Now you have to go think like, what machine learning thing can I put in? Is it going to be biased? Is it going to like flag stuff that is actually fine, but the data set it's been trained on is biased? And that's why it's flagging these things, and it's causing me more work than it's helping me. So I think it's those things that as an indie hacker and stuff like that, you often run into, and where you kind of like lose steam with the thing because it's just like, oh my goodness, I don't know. But again, then I think that's where community comes in, right? Where you can talk about these things to other indie hackers, and they might say, hey, you know what? I've actually had that fear, but this is how I solved it. And you can be like, oh my goodness, I did not know about this. So I think that's where community comes into play. So yeah, well, good luck with those. I think there's something there, and I hope it blossoms into something that the cosplay community can be excited about. Another thing that I'm excited about, because I saw that you posted this in July-ish of this year, I think, is a blogging series about using DevTools for beginners, which is like perfect for the audience of this podcast. 2 questions. What do you see as DevTools? Because oftentimes when I think DevTools, I think you open Command Alt I, those DevTools, or do you mean more a broad sense of DevTools?
Yeah, maybe DevTools wasn't the best word to use there. So for me as a self-taught developer, one of the hardest parts, I think, of learning things was tutorials and courses, things like that would cover the language or the framework you're on, but they would kind of assume that you know how to set up your local development environment, or they might assume that you know how to use a package handler or whatever. And those are the things where it's like, wait, what is this NPM? What does that even mean? And then you have to go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole of figuring out how to do these things and then connecting the pieces. And I think that that's a part that's sorely lacking in educational content, or at least it's hard to find it. So I was considering a while back, I wanted to start writing more blogging more. I kind of enjoy doing it, and I would like to give back to the development community that's taught me so much over the years. And so I asked an early stage developer that I've been mentoring for a while what his biggest pain points were, or things that he would love to have more resources about. And he basically said exactly that, that, connecting all those pieces of, yeah, sure, there's teaching me how to code, but they're not teaching me how to set up my environment so I can be ready to code, or things like that. And as soon as he said that, it kind of clicked that, oh yeah, I had that same problem. It makes sense. I would love to write about something like that then. To be honest, I I haven't, since I posted that, I haven't made any progress. I've been dealing with a new job and an international move. So things have been falling a little bit behind schedule, but I'm hoping to get started working on the actual posts soon. And I'm also open to, I'm hoping it'll be a growing, living thing. So I'm open to, if somebody asks, hey, could you cover this topic? If it's something that I'm able to cover, then I'd be happy to add it to the list and to the series and write about it. Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited to do it. I'm hoping to learn a lot about it while I write too.
Yeah, no, that's one of my, again, I've also neglected blogging. I used to do it in the early days a lot. And then I kind of stopped. I think I hit a serious case of imposter syndrome, and I was literally too scared to post anything because I was like, what if I'm completely wrong here and somebody points it out?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that's held me back from writing for years. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the other thing of there's so much on the internet. What is it going to help me to just write yet another blog post? And there's, and it's, it's, both of those things are like, you're trying to, it's your amygdala trying to keep you safe. But there's no real danger here. But try convincing that little monkey mind that it's wrong. That does
exactly. I mean, that's always been the big thing pushing me back is, yeah, but what do I know? Because everything I know, I've already learned from the internet, so it's already out there. What am I going to contribute to that? But over time, I've had to just learn that I have a unique perspective, just like everyone else has their own unique perspective, because of their experiences. And, maybe my unique perspective might help one person. So why not?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's the key is everybody has a unique way of approaching things. And the way you do it might just be the way that helps somebody else understand it, where all the other things they read, just it didn't click. I mean, I for the longest time didn't quite click with closures, and then I followed a course on front-end masters where one person was talking about it. I can't remember her name now, but and the way that she explained it was just like, oh, it's actually kind of obvious now that I understand what it is. So
exactly,
I think the more voices, I think the whole talk about diversity, it leads. This is part of it. Diverse voices, I think, is important. Because, again, somebody that I also mentored just yesterday told me, I don't understand what the package.json is. And I was like, right. It is kind of confusing, right? It's this thing that you have in the root folder and you kind of think that you have to have it, but you're like, I put it there because it seems like it needs to be there, but honest to goodness, I don't know what it does. And so I want to dig into it a little bit more, and I think this is the kind of stuff that you want to cover in your blog series, because it is like, what is it? What's the point of it? And there's a reason, there's a point for it, but it's not obvious if you don't go and really dig into it. And it's actually important to understand what its purpose is. Yeah, so that's super interesting. So with that, and the fact that you've mentioned that you do mentor folks, what advice do you have, for early stage web developers, as I like to call it, either from a technical perspective or a career growth, finding work thing, or both?
Yeah. I'd say I've got kind of two main things that I usually try to tell people. First of all, build something real. Tutorials, courses, things like that are great and all, but they only go so far. The first time you have a project where it's, hey, here's a list of requirements, or we want to accomplish XYZ, whatever, and you just have to use critical thinking to figure out how to build it. And sure, you can, you're going to Google a lot, and you're going to probably copy a lot of things from Stack Overflow, although preferably you would write it while reading because it'll stick better. But either way, you're going to do a lot of that. But the fact that you had to use critical thinking to connect those pieces and to make each little piece work together as opposed to just following a course, you're going to learn wildly more than you would have in months of courses versus one project like that. It's gonna grow your learning and your experience exponentially. And I think And not only that, but it also helps your portfolio, right? I mean, there's a portfolio of, hey, I did this. And as someone who doesn't have a degree, I learned early on that for my resume to even be considered, I had to have a portfolio of real things that I built. Tutorial things that I built are fine and all, but they don't go very far. You need to show, hey, I built this thing on my own. I didn't follow a tutorial. It was my creation. It doesn't have to be complicated, but just something. And, going into that, the first time you do that, it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be terrifying. You're probably going to think that nobody should pay you right now because of your inexperience, or maybe you don't feel worthy of being paid, or you don't think that they will think you're worthy of being paid, or whatever, right? But, I mean, veteran developers have these same thoughts. It's called imposter syndrome, like you already said. We always think about this, but your first project, now don't lie, be transparent. I'm an early stage developer, I'm learning, but I'm confident that I will do whatever it takes to get this done and to build the product that you want. I'm going to learn a lot along the way. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's kind of the whole point of a job of a developer, is figuring it out. I mean, even now, it's not always just coding, it's figuring it out. So I think, you have to just push yourself past that and jump on a project. I mean, sure, you could do a free project for some people, but getting paid for an actual project, whether it's freelance or whatever, even if it's just a small amount, I don't know, it's a world of difference, and it makes you feel more confident too. And it's just a great feeling of, hey, I built that, people are using it, I got paid for it. It'll change a lot. So I think that's a huge milestone for early stage developers that you have to try and get over as soon as you can. And the second thing, which kind of ties into the first one, is contribute to open source. You can either get into open source as a gateway into building things on your own, so you can seek those things out. A lot of open source software, they have public GitHubs, things like that. You can go search through their issue list, and a lot of times they have them tagged for like good first time issues or something like that. That are great to just kind of introduce you into working on something, a project that other people work on. Or it can be a side effect of the first thing, where you start building things that use open source, and then you start finding bugs, or you start finding missing features that you think it could use, and then you contribute to add those things, which is how I got into it. And either way, it's great, because it not only gives you more experience to work on different technologies, or even if it's the same technology, just different projects, but it helps you get involved in the community. You get to meet new people. It helps you learn how to contribute to a project where you're not the only contributor. So it kind of helps maybe teach you things about Git and how that works, or just in general, like code reviews, things like that. Speaking of code reviews, it also means that other developers who are successfully maintaining software are going to be reviewing your code, which just means that it gives you new perspectives on your code reviews. Don't take offense if they tell you did something wrong, or you should change it this way or that way. Just be open-minded about that, and understand that they are successfully maintaining the software. You're contributing to it, so use that as a learning experience. You can push back if you disagree, but just be civil about it. And then it also can get your name out there. I mean, I had a job offer simply because I was contributing to certain open source software. And when they found out I was leaving my job at the time, they reached out to me and were like, hey, is it too late to offer you a job? So, I mean, it can open up great opportunities. Plus, it looks good on a resume. You can always put that on a resume of that you contributed to these open source software. And then it also just, I don't know, it's a different feeling to successfully have code that you wrote be merged into open source software that who knows how many other people use. It's super rewarding. It feels really cool.
Yeah, that's incredible advice. Thanks for sharing that. And that leads me into one of the last questions I have for you, and it is, so you've built a SaaS product that that you are very proud of, and as you should be. What have you learned about product development in the process of building this project?
Yeah, so the project is Status Tracker. It was my first SaaS product. It was my first time really delving into the indie hacking community and trying to build my own thing. So, I mean, I've learned a lot from that project. One of the things I learned in that project was something I said earlier, which was the best tool or the best technology to use is a technology that you know well. I use this as an excuse to learn some new things, but kind of a combination of some new things, some things I was familiar with. So it meant that I didn't build it as well as I could have, but I did learn some new stuff. And so I built it on Next.js, and I used a boilerplate. So it kind of came with some TypeScript baked in and some other stuff with GraphQL and a few other tools. So I was able to learn a few new things that I've since used on following projects. But it also kind of taught me personally, I am not great at the non-technical part of building and maintaining a product. I need the yin to my yang to be able to handle those non-tech parts. I can try to do them poorly, but I don't enjoy them and I'm not great at them. So things like, reaching out to the community and talking to potential users and, just typical sales marketing type things, they're just not an area that I'm comfortable in. And I tried it and I kind of lost my interest. I kind of lost my interest in the project entirely while trying to do those things. So some people are able to jump in and do those things and some people aren't. And you kind of have to figure that out for yourself. For me, I figured out that it's not the right fit for me and I need to find someone else to help me with that. Now, some of that could, though, be the subject matter. With my cause place, I feel a lot better doing those things because it's a community that I'm already involved in. I'm my own user, so it helps a lot. And I'm already... I am a cosplayer. I talk with other cosplayers. I enjoy that community and being involved with them. So it's a little different. So I think part of that too is, if you're going to build something like this and maintain a product, maybe focus on something that the target audience is an audience that you want to be a part of, or that you are a part of, or that you enjoy working with. Something like that, where you're not going to get burnt out dealing with them every day.
Yeah, that's great advice. I 100% agree with all of that. Me building a company, it's turned into an agency, and that's what I didn't want it to be. So now I have to 180, and I have to ask myself these tough questions about how did I get here, and how do I walk it back to being the thing that I actually wanted it to be to start off with, and also defining what those things are. I think the reason why it happened is I never defined them. I never wrote the company mission, if you want to put it that way. And so if you don't have a North Star, then it's easy to get off course without realizing it. If you don't have questions to ask yourself when somebody reaches out to you to do work, you don't have those questions like, does this go towards the mission of the company? No, then don't take the work. And of course, circumstances can affect that. Like if a pandemic hits and you suddenly find that, oh boy, you might put the mission on the side for a little bit and say yes to things you wouldn't normally do. But it's one of those things that happens. So in closing, I know you enjoy traveling. I used to love it when I used to be able to do that through one of the clients that I work with.
Cool, yeah.
As you mentioned, you've been doing less of that for the same reason everybody else has been doing this. But I'm curious, what has been some of the favorite places that you've visited and why those places?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I'm not much of a favorite person. Like I'm terrible at picking favorites. But I think, I guess I would probably have to say just France in general, but mostly that's because we lived there for the past 4 years. So we've been able to travel it and see more of it than we have really anything else. So I've been able to have a few kind of really cool memories of, we've taken a couple of road trips through France. The first time we lived in Paris, and we drove down through France, down south, went down to Nice, and then we kind of spent about a week driving along the Côte d'Azur, or the French Riviera. And so we kind of drove our way west over to Montpellier, and then kind of drove back up north to Paris again. So we kind of got to see quite a bit of the coast, but then also, southern France and things like that. We got to see a lot of really cool stuff. We didn't spend a lot of time in any one location, but it was just being able to see as much of it as we could was really cool. And I think that was right after things started opening up after the pandemic. Well, after the pandemic, during the pandemic, when things started opening up. And so we decided, well, we don't want to take a train, we don't want to be enclosed with other humans right now. So let's take a car, let's drive, be on our own. And so we got to do stuff like that. And then we got a little bit later, my parents came to visit. And so we took a road trip through the north of France and went through a lot of Normandy and places like that. And so we've been able to see so much of France. It's just been really cool. But I look forward to being able to do that in other locations. Now that we're in Ireland, I'd like to do that more here. But also, there's still plenty more of the world in general that we would like to travel to more. And I think my number one place that we are wanting to go to, that we were supposed to have gone to during the pandemic, was for our 10-year wedding anniversary. We were going to New Zealand. We were going to do the whole Hobbit Trail thing, all that stuff. But of course, COVID ruined that. So that's on our plans. We're hoping to get that rescheduled soon. But I think that's kind of my number one. Like, I'm excited. I've been excited to go to New Zealand for years. So I really look forward to it.
Yeah, sounds exciting. Yeah, I think that's also a place that I'd like to visit, more so than Australia, to be honest. Australia just have too many bugs. I don't do good with bugs, and some of the freaky stuff that I've seen there, it just comes out of your shoes in the morning. I'm just like, no.
It is terrifying. It is. I mean, I'm morbidly curious to go, but we have some friends that we met in France who now live in Australia. So, they've offered to house us if we go visit. So we might do it one day, but I'm kind of the same, of like, a little nervous, but still really would like to go.
Yeah, it's a beautiful country. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah. It's just, there's a lot of creepy crawlies, and I don't do good with those creepy crawlies.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, Joel, thanks. This was really, really good. I really enjoyed speaking with you. It's really easy to talk to you, and I think we share a lot of the same interests, so that helps, and the same viewpoints. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Hope you have a lovely weekend, and thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mycelium Network podcast. If you're not already, please subscribe, star, and leave a review for us in your podcatcher of choice. This helps others find us and helps us make a better podcast for you, our listeners. You can also find and follow us on Twitter @Network Mycelium and join the community on Discord. All the links are available in the show notes.